The summer heat in Millerville, Texas, was unforgiving. The asphalt on Main Street seemed to shimmer like water, and even the old oak trees that lined the sidewalks appeared to wilt under the relentless sun. In a modest two-bedroom house on Elm Street, 16-year-old Tommy Mitchell sat on his front porch, carefully tuning the strings of what could generously be called a guitar. The instrument had seen better days, probably decades ago. Tommy had found it in a dumpster behind Murphy's music store 3 months earlier, missing 2 strings and with a crack running down the back that he'd patched with duct tape. The frets were worn smooth in places and the tuning pegs stuck, but to Tommy, it might as well have been made of gold. "Tommy, come help me with these groceries," called his mother, Linda Mitchell, as she struggled up the front steps with paper bags from the discount grocery store. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her waitress uniform from Dolly's Diner showed the wear of a 12-hour shift. "Yes, ma'am," Tommy replied, carefully setting his guitar against the porch railing. He jogged down to help his mother, noting how she winced slightly as she climbed the steps. She'd been working double shifts at the diner for the past month, and the strain was showing. "How was work today, Mom?" Tommy asked as they carried the bags into the small kitchen. "Oh, same as always. Tips were decent today, though. Mrs. Henderson left me an extra $5. Said she appreciated me remembering how she likes her coffee." Linda smiled, but Tommy could see the exhaustion in her green eyes. "Your daddy called. He's picking up an extra shift at the warehouse tonight, so it'll just be you and me for dinner." Tommy nodded, already knowing the routine. His father, Robert Mitchell, worked days at the grain elevator and nights loading trucks at a distribution center. Tommy couldn't remember the last time they'd all sat down for dinner together on a weeknight. As they unpacked the groceries, mostly generic brands and marked down items, Tommy noticed his mother had bought him a new set of guitar strings. "Mom, you didn't have to—" "Hush now!" Linda interrupted, ruffling his sandy brown hair. "I know how much that old guitar means to you, and who knows, maybe someday you'll be up on stage making us proud." Tommy hugged his mother tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of coffee and vanilla that always clung to her uniform. "I'm gonna practice extra hard, Mom, I promise." Later that evening, after they'd shared a simple dinner of spaghetti and canned sauce, Tommy sat on his bed, carefully replacing the worn strings on his guitar. Each note he played seemed to fill the small room with possibility. He taught himself to play by watching YouTube videos on his phone when he could get Wi-Fi at the library, and by listening to country music on the old radio in the kitchen. His hero was George Strait, the king of country himself. Tommy had every one of Strait's albums memorized, could play most of his songs by ear, and dreamed of someday performing on the same stages where his idol had made history. The walls of his room were covered with pictures he'd printed at the library, images of George Strait performing at the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo, accepting awards at the Country Music Association ceremony, and standing with his iconic cowboy hat and genuine smile. "Someday," Tommy whispered to himself as he strummed the opening chords to Amarillo Morning. "Someday, I'm gonna meet him and tell him how much his music means to me." The next morning, Tommy woke to the sound of his parents talking in hushed tones in the kitchen. He crept quietly to his bedroom door to listen. "Just don't know how we're gonna make the rent this month, Rob. The car needs new tires, and Tommy's gonna need new shoes for school." "I know, honey. I'm looking into picking up weekend work at the Johnson farm, maybe hauling hay or helping with the harvest." "You're already working yourself to death. I worry about you." Tommy felt a familiar knot form in his stomach. He knew his parents struggled, but hearing it spoken aloud always made it feel more real, more urgent. He quietly closed his door and picked up his guitar, letting the music wash away the worry for a few precious minutes. Around noon, his best friend Sarah Williams knocked on the door. Sarah was a year younger than Tommy, with curly red hair and freckles that seemed to dance when she smiled. Her family wasn't wealthy either, Her dad worked at the post office and her mom cleaned houses, but they got by a little better than the Mitchells. "Hey, Tommy, you ready for some good news?" Sarah burst through the door, practically vibrating with excitement. "I could use some good news," Tommy admitted, setting his guitar aside. "You know Jake Rodriguez, right? The guy who works at the radio station." Tommy nodded. Jake was 19, had graduated high school 3 years ago, and had landed a part-time job at KCTX, the local country music station. He was dating Sarah's older sister, which made him practically family in their tight-knit group. "Well, Jake just called my sister, and you're not going to believe this. George Strait is coming to perform at a benefit concert in Austin next weekend." Tommy's heart skipped a beat. Austin was only 2 hours away, but it might as well have been on the moon as far as he was concerned. That's amazing, Sarah, but you know I can't afford tickets to a George Strait concert. Those probably cost more than my family makes in a week." Sarah's grin grew even wider. "That's the best part. It's a benefit concert for the Children's Hospital of Central Texas. Jake said they're selling some tickets at the door for just $25 each. It's first come, first served, but if we get there early enough, $25. Tommy did quick math in his head. He had $18 saved from doing odd jobs around the neighborhood, mowing lawns, walking dogs, helping elderly Mrs. Patterson with her groceries. He was $7 short, but maybe... "When is it?" he asked, trying to keep the hope out of his voice. "Saturday afternoon. Jake's driving up there anyway to cover it for the radio station. He said he could take us if we want to go." Tommy's mind raced. Saturday was his mom's only day off in weeks. She'd been looking forward to sleeping in and maybe watching a movie together. And his dad would be working at the warehouse until midnight. But this was George Strait, his hero, his inspiration, the reason he picked up a guitar every single day. "I need to ask my parents," Tommy said finally. That evening, after his father came home exhausted from another double shift, Tommy gathered the courage to bring up the concert. They were sitting at the small kitchen table, sharing leftover spaghetti and discussing Tommy's upcoming junior year of high school. "Dad, Mom, there's something I wanted to ask you about." Robert Mitchell looked up from his plate. At 42, he looked older than his years. His hands were permanently stained from working at the grain elevator, and his back ached constantly from the heavy lifting. But his brown eyes still held warmth when he looked at his son. "What's on your mind, son?" Tommy took a deep breath. "George Strait is doing a benefit concert in Austin this Saturday. Sarah and Jake can give me a ride, and the tickets are only $25. I know it's a lot of money, but—" "Tommy," his mother interrupted gently, "you know we can't spare $25 right now. We're behind on the electric bill as it is." "I have $18 saved up," Tommy said quickly. "I just need 7 more. I could do extra chores or maybe help Mr. Patterson fix his fence." His parents exchanged a look, one of those wordless communications that came from 20 years of marriage and shared struggle. "Son," his father said slowly, "I admire your dedication to your music, I really do. But we have to be practical. That $25 could buy groceries for 3 days. Tommy felt his chest tighten with disappointment, but he nodded. He understood. He'd always understood that his dreams came second to survival. "However," his father continued, reaching into his wallet, "your mother and I have been talking, and we think it's important to support your passion when we can." He pulled out a crumpled $10 bill. "This is what I can spare. If you can earn the rest, you can go." Tommy stared at the money in disbelief. $10 might not seem like much to most people, but he knew it represented his father working an extra hour at the warehouse, or his mother walking instead of driving to save gas money. "Dad, are you sure?" "I'm sure, son. Your mom and I. We want you to have opportunities we never had. Maybe music is that opportunity for you." Linda reached across the table and squeezed Tommy's hand. "Just promise us you'll be careful, and that you'll call us when you get there and when you're heading home." "I promise," Tommy said, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you. Both of you. I'll never forget this." Over the next 3 days, Tommy worked harder than he'd ever worked in his life. He mowed Mrs. Patterson's lawn and helped her organize her garage, earning $5. He walked the Henderson family's 3 dogs every morning before they left for work, earning another $3. By Friday evening, he had exactly $28, enough for the ticket and a little extra for gas money to contribute to Jake's drive. That night, he could barely sleep. Tomorrow, he would see George Strait perform live. Tomorrow, he might even get close enough to ask for an autograph. He spent hours lying in bed, imagining what he might say if he actually got the chance to meet his hero. Saturday morning dawned clear and beautiful. Tommy was up before sunrise, carefully choosing what to wear. He settled on his best jeans, the ones without holes, and a button-down shirt his mother had bought him for church. He polished his worn boots until they gleamed and spent extra time making sure his hair looked just right. "You look very handsome, sweetie," his mother said as she made him breakfast. "I packed you some sandwiches and chips for the ride, and here..." She handed him her old digital camera. "Take some pictures, I want to see everything." At 8 o'clock, Jake Rodriguez pulled up in his beat-up Honda Civic. Jake was tall and lanky, with black hair and an easy smile that had charmed Sarah's sister immediately. He worked part-time at KCTX while taking classes at the community college, hoping to eventually become a full-time radio host. "Ready for this, Tommy?" Jake called out as Sarah climbed into the back seat. "I've been ready my whole life," Tommy replied, clutching his camera and the envelope containing his $28. As they drove toward Austin, the landscape gradually changed from small-town Texas to the bustling outskirts of the capital city. Tommy watched out the window, his stomach churning with a mixture of excitement and nerves. Sarah chatted excitedly about the concert, while Jake shared stories about other performers he'd interviewed for the radio station. "One time, I got to interview Miranda Lambert," Jake said, navigating through increasing traffic. "She was actually really down to earth, talked to me for 20 minutes about growing up in East Texas. Do you think there's any chance we might actually meet George Strait?" Tommy asked, trying to keep the hope out of his voice. Jake glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Well, I do have press credentials for the station. Sometimes after these benefit concerts, the artists will stick around to meet fans, especially kids, but I wouldn't get your hopes up too high, you know? He's probably got a tight schedule." Tommy nodded, but privately he allowed himself to dream. What would he say if he met George Strait? How do you tell someone that their music has been the soundtrack to your dreams, the comfort during your family's hardest times, the reason you believe that maybe, just maybe, you can make something of yourself? As they crested a hill and saw the Austin skyline spread out before them, Tommy felt like he was dreaming. This couldn't be real. "Mr. Webb," Mrs. Rodriguez interjected diplomatically, "Tommy is still in high school. Any discussion about his musical future would need to involve his parents." "Of course," Webb nodded. "I completely understand. That's exactly why I wanted to meet in person rather than just calling. I believe in doing things the right way, especially when working with young artists." Principal Davis offered his office for the meeting and discreetly left them alone to talk. "Tommy," Webb continued, "I'll get straight to the point. I've been in this business for 15 years and I know raw talent when I hear it. Your performance of those George Strait songs wasn't just good. It was authentic, emotional, and technically solid. That's a rare combination." "Thank you, sir," Tommy managed to say. "What I'd like to propose is setting up a meeting with you and your parents to discuss some opportunities. I work with several venues in Austin that showcase up-and-coming artists. I also have connections with some recording studios that might be interested in working with you." Tommy's mind was reeling. Recording studios, professional venues, this was beyond anything he'd ever imagined. "Mr. Webb," Mrs. Rodriguez said carefully, "what exactly are you proposing?" "Nothing that would interfere with Tommy's education," Webb assured her. I'm talking about weekend gigs, maybe some recording sessions during school breaks. The goal would be to build his experience and his reputation gradually, the right way. He pulled out a business card and handed it to Tommy. I'd like to invite you and your parents to come to Austin this Saturday. There's a showcase at a club called the Broken Spoke. It's a legendary venue where a lot of major artists got their start. I'd like you to see what the next level looks like, and if you're interested, maybe we can get you on stage for a song or two. Tommy stared at the business card, his hands trembling slightly. The Broken Spoke was a venue he'd heard about, but never dreamed of visiting. Some of his musical heroes had played there early in their careers. I'll need to talk to my parents, Tommy said. Of course. Here's my card, and here's a packet of information about my company and the artists I represent. Take your time, do your research, and call me when you're ready to talk. After Webb left, Tommy and Mrs. Rodriguez sat in the principal's office in stunned silence. Tommy, Mrs. Rodriguez said finally, do you understand what just happened? I think so. I mean, not really. This is all happening so fast. This is what we call a big break in the music business. Marcus Webb has a solid reputation. I looked him up on my phone while you two were talking. He's helped launch several successful careers. But I'm just a kid from Millerville. I can't be ready for something like this. Tommy, sometimes readiness isn't about technical skill or experience. Sometimes it's about having something genuine to offer at exactly the right moment. George Strait saw it. Your audience at the talent show saw it, and now a professional talent manager sees it. Maybe it's time you started seeing it too. That afternoon, Tommy could barely concentrate on his classes. Word had somehow spread that he'd met with a talent manager from Austin, and he found himself surrounded by curious classmates between periods. Is it true you're going to be a recording artist? Asked Jennifer Walsh, a girl who had never spoken to him before. Are you going to be famous? Added her friend Casey. I don't know anything yet, Tommy replied honestly. I just met with him today. Emma Patterson appeared at his locker during lunch break. I heard about your meeting, she said. How are you feeling about it? Overwhelmed, Tommy admitted. Scared, excited. I can't tell if this is the best thing that's ever happened to me or if I'm getting in over my head. Can I give you some advice? Tommy nodded. Don't let other people's reactions, positive or negative, influence your decision. This is about your music, your dreams, and your family. Trust your instincts, and don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. After school, Tommy went straight home to talk to his parents. He found them both in the kitchen. His father had gotten off work early, and his mother was between her lunch and dinner shifts at the diner. Mom, Dad, I need to tell you about something that happened today. He recounted his meeting with Marcus Webb. Showing them the business card and information packet, his parents listened with growing amazement. A talent manager? His mother asked, taking the business card and examining it like it might disappear. From Austin, his father added. Son, this is incredible. He wants us to come to Austin this Saturday to see a showcase at something called the Broken Spoke. He said I might even get to perform. Robert and Linda Mitchell exchanged one of their wordless looks. Tommy, his father said slowly, you know we can't afford to miss work on a Saturday. Saturday is your mother's biggest tip day at the diner, and I'm supposed to work at the warehouse. Tommy's heart sank. He'd been so caught up in the excitement that he hadn't considered the practical realities. But, his father continued, this is your future we're talking about. We'll figure out the money situation. This is too important to pass up. Rob, are you sure? His mother asked. We're already behind on the electric bill. Linda, our son has a chance that kids like us never get. We have to make this work. That evening, the Mitchell family sat around their kitchen table making plans. They would drive to Austin early Saturday morning. It would be cheaper than staying overnight. Robert would tell his supervisor at the warehouse that he had a family emergency. Linda would ask her manager at the diner if she could work a double shift on Friday to make up for missing Saturday. "Are you nervous?" his mother asked as they finalized their plans. "Terrified," Tommy admitted. "What if I'm not good enough? What if this is all some kind of mistake?" "Tommy," his father said, "do you remember what you told us after you met George Strait? You said he made you feel like your dreams were possible. Maybe now it's time to find out just how possible they really are." Friday seemed to last forever. Tommy went through the motions of attending classes, but his mind was entirely focused on Saturday. Mrs. Rodriguez had given him permission to miss their regular after-school practice session, understanding that he needed to prepare mentally for what might be the most important day of his musical life. That evening, he sat on his front porch with his guitar, running through songs and trying to decide what he would perform if given the opportunity. He'd learned several new songs since the fall festival, including some of his own compositions, but he kept coming back to the George Strait songs that had started this whole journey. Mrs. Henderson joined him on her porch, as had become her evening routine. "Big day tomorrow," she observed. "Yes, ma'am. I'm pretty nervous about it." Earl used to say that being nervous before a performance meant you cared about doing well. The day you stop being nervous is the day you stop caring. Did Earl ever have opportunities like this? Mrs. Henderson was quiet for a moment. "No, honey, he didn't. Opportunities like this were much rarer back then, especially for people from small towns. But he would have been so excited for you. He always believed that talent finds a way to shine no matter where it comes from." Saturday morning arrived grey and cloudy, with a cold November wind that made the 2-hour drive to Austin feel longer than usual. Tommy sat in the back seat of his parents' aging Honda Civic, his guitar case carefully secured beside him, watching the landscape change from rural farmland to suburban developments to the outskirts of Texas's capital city. The Broken Spoke was located on South Lamar Boulevard in a part of Austin that mixed trendy restaurants with old-school honky-tonks. The building itself was unassuming, a low wooden structure with a neon sign and a parking lot full of pickup trucks and motorcycles. "This is it?" Tommy's mother asked as they pulled into the parking lot. "This is it," Tommy confirmed, checking the address against Marcus Webb's instructions. Inside, the Broken Spoke was everything Tommy had imagined a legendary country music venue would be. The walls were covered with photographs of famous artists who had performed there. The floor was well-worn hardwood, and the stage, while small, had an aura of history and importance. Marcus Webb spotted them immediately and approached with a warm smile. "The Mitchell family. Welcome to the Broken Spoke. Tommy, how are you feeling?" "Nervous," Tommy replied honestly. "Good. That means you're taking this seriously." Webb gestured around the room. "This place has been showcasing country music talent for over 50 years. Willie Nelson played here. George Strait played here when he was just starting out. Countless artists who went on to have major careers got some of their first professional experience on this stage." He led them to a table near the stage where they could watch the afternoon showcase. Today's lineup includes 6 up-and-coming artists from around Texas. You'll get to see what professional-level performances look like, and if you feel comfortable after watching, I'd love to have you close the show with 1 or 2 songs. For the next 2 hours, Tommy watched in awe as 6 talented musicians took the stage. Each performance was polished, professional, and engaging. The artists ranged in age from early 20s to late 30s, and each had their own style and approach to country music. But as impressive as the performances were, Tommy found himself thinking about something George Strait had told him. "It's not the instrument that makes the music, it's the musician." These artists had better equipment, more experience, and professional backing, but they weren't necessarily telling more authentic stories than Tommy had told at his high school talent show. After the sixth performer finished his set, Marcus Webb approached their table. "Well, Tommy, what do you think? Are you ready to get up there?" Tommy looked at his parents, both of whom nodded encouragingly. "Yes, sir, I think I am." "What would you like to perform?" Tommy had been thinking about this throughout the showcase. "I'd like to do Amarillo Morning and one of my own songs, if that's okay." "You write your own material?" Webb asked, his eyebrows rising with interest. "I've been working on a few songs. Nothing fancy, just stories about growing up in a small town." "Original material is exactly what the industry is looking for right now. Let's do it." As Tommy walked onto the stage at the Broken Spoke, he felt a familiar mixture of nervousness and excitement. But there was something else too, a sense of belonging, like this was where he was meant to be. The audience was smaller than at the Fall Festival, maybe 50 people, but they were all serious music fans who had come specifically to hear new talent. As Tommy adjusted the microphone and checked his guitar tuning, he could feel their attention focusing on him. "Good afternoon, everyone," he said into the microphone. "I'm Tommy Mitchell from Millerville, Texas. A couple of months ago, I got to meet my musical hero George Strait, and he encouraged me to keep pursuing music, so I wanted to start today with one of his songs that means a lot to me." He launched into Amarillo Morning and immediately felt the audience respond positively. This was a song every country music fan knew and loved, and Tommy's version was respectful to the original while still showing his own personality and style. When the song ended, the applause was enthusiastic and sustained. "Thank you," Tommy said. "Now I'd like to try something a little different. This is a song I wrote myself about growing up in a small town where everyone knows your name and your family's story. It's called Main Street Memories." The song he'd written was simple but heartfelt, telling the story of a young person who dreams of seeing the world but comes to appreciate the value of community, family, and roots. As he sang about Friday night football games, summer festivals, and the way neighbors look out for each other, Tommy could see heads nodding throughout the audience. When he finished, the response was immediate and powerful. People were on their feet, applauding and cheering, and Tommy could see several audience members wiping away tears. "Thank you so much," Tommy said into the microphone, his own voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for listening to my story." As he walked off the stage, Marcus Webb was waiting with a huge smile. "Tommy, that was incredible. That original song, where did that come from?" "Just my life, I guess. Growing up in Millerville, watching my parents work so hard, seeing how people in small towns support each other. That's exactly what country music needs right now. Authentic stories told by someone who's actually lived them. Tommy, I'd like to talk to you and your parents about some specific opportunities." They spent the next hour in a corner booth discussing possibilities that seemed surreal to Tommy. Webb talked about booking him for weekend showcases at venues around Texas, about connecting him with a songwriter who could help him develop his original material, and about the possibility of recording a demo in a professional studio. "The key," Webb explained, "is building your experience and your fan base gradually. I don't believe in throwing young artists into situations they're not ready for, but I do believe in creating opportunities for talented people to grow." "What would this mean for Tommy's education?" his mother asked. "Nothing changes there," Webb assured her. "Education comes first, always. We're talking about weekend gigs, maybe some recording sessions during school breaks. The goal is to build his career alongside his education, not instead of it." By the time they left Austin that evening, Tommy felt like his entire world had shifted. He had a business card with Marcus Webb's direct phone number. He had tentative bookings for 2 showcases in December. And most importantly, he had validation from industry professionals that his music was worth pursuing seriously. The drive home was quiet, each family member lost in their own thoughts about the day's events. "Tommy," his father said finally, "I want you to know how proud your mother and I are of you. Not just for your talent, but for how you handled yourself today. You were professional, polite, and genuine. Those are qualities that will serve you well no matter what happens with your music." "I still can't believe this is really happening," Tommy admitted. "6 months ago, I was playing a broken guitar I found in a dumpster. Today, I performed at the Broken Spoke and met with a professional talent manager." "It's happening because you never gave up," his mother said. "Even when money was tight and things seemed impossible, you kept playing, kept practicing, kept believing in your music. That's what made the difference." As they pulled into their driveway in Millerville, Tommy saw that several neighbors were sitting on their porches despite the cold evening air. Word had somehow spread that the Mitchell family had gone to Austin for Tommy's music, and people were curious about how it had gone. Mrs. Henderson was waiting on her front porch with a thermos of hot chocolate. "Well," she called out as they got out of the car, "how did our young musician do in the big city?" "He was wonderful," Linda Mitchell called back. "He performed at the Broken Spoke and got a standing ovation." Soon half the neighborhood had gathered in the Mitchells' front yard, eager to hear about Tommy's experience. As he recounted the day's events, Tommy was struck by how invested his community was in his success. These weren't just neighbors. They were people who had watched him grow up, who had heard him practicing on his front porch, who had cheered for him at the fall festival. "You know what this means, don't you?" said Mr. Patterson with a grin. "We're going to have to start saying we knew you when." "It means Tommy's going to keep working hard and staying humble," his father interjected with a smile. "Success doesn't change who you are. It just gives you a bigger platform to be yourself." Later that night, Tommy sat on his bed with his guitar, processing everything that had happened. His signed poster from George Strait was still hanging on his wall, but now it was joined by the business card from Marcus Webb and a photo from the Broken Spoke that his mother had taken. He thought about the journey that had brought him to this point. From finding a broken guitar in a dumpster to performing on a legendary stage in front of industry professionals. Every step had seemed impossible until it happened. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Tommy, this is Marcus Webb. I wanted to follow up on our conversation today. I've been thinking about your original song, and I believe you have real potential as a songwriter as well as a performer. I'd like to connect you with some people in Nashville who might be interested in your work. We'll talk more soon." Great job today. Nashville, the heart of country music. Tommy had dreamed of visiting Nashville someday, but the idea that music industry professionals there might be interested in his songs seemed beyond anything he'd ever imagined. He set his phone aside and picked up his guitar, strumming softly so as not to wake his parents. As he played Amarillo Morning, the song that had started this whole journey, Tommy thought about George Strait's words of encouragement and promise to keep chasing his dreams. 6 months ago, those dreams had seemed like impossible fantasies. Tonight, they felt like plans in progress. Tommy was no longer just a kid from a small town with a broken guitar and big dreams. He was a musician with talent, determination, and now professional opportunities. The future was uncertain, but it was bright with possibility. As he finally drifted off to sleep, Tommy's last thought was of gratitude for his parents' sacrifices, for his community's support, for Mrs. Rodriguez's guidance, and for that life-changing moment when George Strait had seen something special in a nervous kid who just wanted an autograph. Sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin with the simplest dreams. Tommy Mitchell's journey was just beginning, but he already knew that no matter how far his music might take him, he would never forget where it all started. On a front porch in Millerville, Texas, with a duct-taped guitar and a heart full of hope. The world did indeed need his music, just as George Strait had promised, and Tommy was finally ready to share it. The Epilogue. 6 months later, spring had arrived early in Millerville, and Tommy Mitchell sat on his familiar front porch. But this time, he was holding a brand new Taylor acoustic guitar, a gift from Marcus Webb, after Tommy's third successful showcase in Austin. The old duct-taped guitar sat beside him, carefully preserved as a reminder of where his journey had begun. In the past 6 months, Tommy's life had changed dramatically while somehow staying exactly the same. He was still a junior at Millerville High School, still helped his parents with household chores, still sat on this same porch every evening. But now, he also had a recording contract with a small but respected Nashville label, a growing fan base across Texas, and 3 original songs climbing the regional country music charts. His parents had been able to pay off their overdue bills with the money from Tommy's weekend performances. More importantly, they had begun to believe that their son's dreams weren't just possible, they were becoming reality. As the sun set over Main Street, Tommy strummed the opening chords to his newest song, Keys to the Future, which he'd written about this very porch, this very view, and the simple moment when George Strait had handed a starstruck kid something more valuable than an autograph. He'd handed him the keys to believing in himself. Mrs. Henderson appeared on her porch, as she had every evening for the past year. "What are you working on tonight, sweetie?" she called. "Just remembering," Tommy replied, his fingers moving easily across the strings of his new guitar. Remembering how it all started. In the distance, he could hear the sound of another young musician practicing, a 10-year-old named Bobby Chen, who lived 2 streets over and had started learning guitar after seeing Tommy perform at the Fall Festival. The circle was continuing, dreams inspiring dreams, music creating more music. Tommy smiled and began to sing, his voice carrying across the quiet neighborhood, telling the story of a small-town boy whose world had changed the day. A country music legend reminded him that sometimes the most extraordinary gifts come wrapped in the simplest packages, like an autograph that became a promise, and a promise that became a destiny. The end. Character count: 89,247. Seeing the future. A place where dreams might actually come true, where a kid from a small town with a duct-taped guitar could become something more than anyone ever expected. The concert venue was already bustling with activity when they arrived. The Children's Hospital benefit concert was being held at an outdoor amphitheater, and volunteers were setting up booths selling T-shirts, programs, and hospital fundraising materials. The smell of barbecue and funnel cakes filled the air, and families with children were already claiming spots on the grass near the stage. Tommy's hands shook slightly as he handed over his $25 at the ticket booth. The volunteer, an elderly woman with a kind smile, looked at his eager face and handed him not just a ticket, but a small poster featuring all the performers. "First concert, honey?" she asked. "First George Strait concert," Tommy admitted. "I've been dreaming about this for years." "Well, you picked a good one. He's supposed to be doing some of his biggest hits today, and all for a great cause. You enjoy yourself, sweetheart." As they found their seats, general admission spots on the grass about 50 yards from the stage, Tommy felt like he was living in a dream. The stage looked enormous, decorated with red, white, and blue bunting, and a huge banner reading "Benefit Concert for Children's Hospital of Central Texas." The opening acts were local bands that Tommy had heard on KCTX, talented musicians who played with passion and energy, but Tommy was barely listening. His eyes were fixed on the side of the stage, watching for any sign of George Strait's arrival. Sarah had to nudge him several times to get his attention when she tried to share her nachos. "Tommy, you're going to give yourself a heart attack if you don't relax," she laughed. "He's not going on for another hour." I know, I can't believe I'm actually here." Jake, meanwhile, was busy taking notes and photos for his radio station coverage. His press pass got him access to areas where regular ticket holders couldn't go, and he'd already disappeared twice to conduct interviews with the opening acts. "Hey," Jake said when he returned from his latest excursion, "I talked to the stage manager. George Strait's tour bus is parked behind the venue. They're planning to bring him through the backstage area around 4:30 to get ready for his 5 o'clock set." Tommy's heart raced. Do you think there's any way we could get back there?" "Well, my press pass only gets me so far, but..." Jake grinned mischievously. "There might be a way. The stage manager said they're always looking for volunteers to help with equipment setup and breakdown. If we offer to help after the show, they might let us stick around." The idea of actually being backstage, in the same area where George Strait would be preparing for his performance, made Tommy feel dizzy with excitement. He spent the next hour barely able to concentrate on the music, mentally rehearsing what he would say if he got the chance to meet his hero. At exactly 5 o'clock, the crowd erupted as George Strait walked onto the stage. Even from their spot on the grass, Tommy could see that iconic silhouette. The cowboy hat, the simple but perfectly fitted shirt, the confident way he carried himself as he approached the microphone. "Hello, Austin!" George's voice boomed across the amphitheater, and the crowd roared its approval. "Thank you all for coming out today to support the Children's Hospital of Central Texas. Every dollar raised today is going directly to help kids and their families during some of the toughest times of their lives." Tommy felt tears prick his eyes. This was really happening. George Strait, his hero, his inspiration, was standing less than 100 feet away, about to perform songs that had shaped Tommy's entire worldview. The opening notes of Amarillo Morning filled the air, and Tommy sang along with every word, his voice joining thousands of others in a massive chorus that seemed to shake the very ground. Sarah watched with amazement as her usually shy friend transformed, singing with confidence and passion that she'd only seen when he played guitar alone in his room. Song after song, George Strait delivered a masterclass in country music. "All my exes live in Texas. Check yes or no. I cross my heart. Each one more perfect than the last." Tommy watched every gesture, studied every chord change, absorbed every moment like he was storing up sunshine for a long winter. During the chair, George slowed things down and spoke to the audience between verses. "You know, music has this amazing power to bring people together," he said, his voice carrying easily across the crowd. "I've been blessed to make music for a living for more than 30 years now, and I never forget that it all started with a dream and a beat-up guitar in a small town in Texas, not too different from some of your hometowns." Tommy's breath caught. It was like George was speaking directly to him. "Sometimes people ask me what advice I'd give to young musicians just starting out," George continued, "and I always tell them the same thing. It's not about having the fanciest equipment or the most expensive guitar. It's about having something to say and the courage to say it. Music comes from the heart, not from the wallet." The crowd cheered, but Tommy felt like those words had been meant specifically for him. Here he was, worried about his duct-taped guitar and his family's financial struggles, and George Strait himself was saying that none of that mattered as much as having heart. After an hour and 15 minutes of pure magic, George Strait took his final bow. The crowd was on its feet, cheering and applauding, many wiping away tears. Tommy felt emotionally drained, like he'd just lived through the most important 90 minutes of his life. "That was incredible," Sarah said, her voice hoarse from singing along. "I've never seen you like that," Jake observed. "You looked like you were in some kind of trance." Tommy nodded, still processing everything he'd experienced. I can't believe that really happened. I can't believe I was in the same place as George Strait, breathing the same air, hearing his voice live." As the crowd began to disperse, Jake approached the stage area where workers were beginning to break down equipment. "Excuse me?" he called to a man in a staff t-shirt. "I'm Jake Rodriguez from KCTX Radio in Millerville. We talked earlier about possibly helping with the breakdown." The stage manager, a burly man named Dennis, looked up from his clipboard. "Oh yeah, the radio guy. Sure, we can always use extra hands. You and your friends want to help load some equipment?" "Absolutely," Jake said, then turned to Tommy and Sarah. "You two up for some work?" For the next hour, they helped carry speakers, coil cables, and load equipment cases onto trucks. It was hot, sweaty work, but Tommy felt like he was living a dream. He was backstage at a George Strait concert, touching equipment that had just been used to create the most beautiful music he'd ever heard live. As they worked, Tommy noticed that George Strait's tour bus was still parked behind the venue. Through the tinted windows, he could see movement inside. "Dennis?" Jake asked casually as they carried a particularly heavy speaker case. "Is Mr. Strait still around?" Dennis glanced toward the bus. "Yeah, he usually hangs out for a while after these benefit shows. Likes to meet with some of the hospital administrators, talk to a few fans, if there are any kids around. He's got a soft spot for young people who are dealing with tough situations." Tommy's heart started racing again. "Do you think, would there be any chance we could meet him? Just for a second. I've been a fan my whole life, and this is the first time I've ever had a chance to see him perform." Dennis studied Tommy's earnest face for a moment. "Well, I can't make any promises, but let me see what I can do. Finish helping us load this truck, and then I'll go talk to his tour manager." Tommy worked harder than he'd ever worked in his life for the next 20 minutes. Every speaker case felt light as a feather. Every coil of cable was wrapped with perfect precision. Sarah and Jake could barely keep up with him. "Tommy, slow down," Sarah laughed. "You're making the rest of us look bad." Finally, Dennis approached them again. "Okay, here's the deal. George has about 10 minutes before he needs to head out to his next show. He's agreed to meet with you three, but keep it brief, okay? Just a quick hello and maybe an autograph." Tommy felt like his legs might give out. This was actually happening. He was about to meet George Strait. Dennis led them to the tour bus, a massive, gleaming vehicle that looked like a luxury apartment on wheels. He knocked on the door, and after a moment it opened to reveal George Strait himself. In person, he looked exactly like he did on stage, but somehow more real, more approachable. He was still wearing his performance clothes, but he'd removed his cowboy hat, revealing salt and pepper hair that looked perfectly styled despite the heat. "Hello there," George said with that famous smile. "Dennis tells me you folks helped out with the equipment breakdown. I appreciate that." "Mr. Strait," Jake stepped forward first, his radio training kicking in. "I'm Jake Rodriguez from KCTX Radio in Millerville. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us." "Millerville," George repeated. "That's out toward East Texas, right? I've played a few shows in that area over the years. Small towns, good people." "Yes, sir," Sarah chimed in, suddenly starstruck despite her usual confidence. "We drove up just to see your show today." "Well, I hope you enjoyed it," George said warmly. Then his eyes settled on Tommy, who had been standing silently, clutching his mother's camera and trying to find his voice. "And what about you, son? You look like you might have something to say." Tommy's mouth went dry. This was his moment, the chance he'd dreamed about for years, and he was frozen. He started, then cleared his throat and tried again. "Mr. Strait, I'm Tommy Mitchell. I just wanted to say that your music has meant everything to me and my family. When times get tough, and they get tough pretty often, your songs remind us that there's still beauty in the world, and that dreams are worth holding on to." George's expression softened. "That means more to me than you know, Tommy. Music is supposed to bring comfort and hope, and I'm glad my songs have been able to do that for your family." "Sir," Tommy continued, gaining courage, "I play guitar too. Well, I try to anyway. I taught myself your songs by listening to them over and over. I know I'm not very good yet, but someday I hope I can make music that means as much to someone else as yours means to me." "What kind of guitar do you play?" George asked, genuinely interested. Tommy felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment. Well, it's not much. I found it in a dumpster and fixed it up as best I could. It's held together with duct tape and prayers, but it makes music. George smiled at that. Son, some of the best music I've ever heard came from guitars that were held together with duct tape and prayers. It's not the instrument that makes the music, it's the musician. He paused, seeming to consider something. Dennis, could you give me just a couple more minutes here? Dennis nodded and stepped away, giving them some privacy. Tommy, George said, I want you to know that every single musician who's ever made it started exactly where you are right now, with a dream, a beat-up instrument, and more heart than money. The fact that you're out here working to help with our equipment breakdown tells me you understand that success comes from hard work and dedication, not just talent. I just love music so much, Tommy said, his voice barely above a whisper. When I play guitar, it's like everything else disappears, all the worries about money and bills and whether we'll be able to keep our house. It all just goes away, and there's only the music. George nodded knowingly. I remember that feeling, still get it sometimes, even after all these years. He looked at Tommy thoughtfully. You know what? I think you've got something special, son. Don't let anyone tell you different. Mr. Strait, Tommy said suddenly, would it be possible to get your autograph? I know it's not much, but I'd treasure it forever. Of course, George said. What would you like me to sign? Tommy pulled out the concert poster the volunteer had given him at the ticket booth. It was slightly crumpled from being carried around all day, but George took it gently and signed it with a flourish. To Tommy Mitchell, he wrote, keep chasing those dreams. The world needs your music. Your friend, George Strait. Tommy stared at the signed poster in disbelief. Not only had George Strait signed it, but he'd written a personal message, one that seemed to acknowledge everything Tommy had been feeling about his music and his dreams. Thank you, Tommy managed to say. This is the best day of my entire life. George smiled. I'm glad I could be part of it. Now, I do need to head out. We've got another show tomorrow in Dallas. But Tommy, I want you to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll keep playing, no matter what happens. Promise me you won't give up on your music, even when things get tough. The world needs artists who play from the heart, and I have a feeling you're going to be one of them. I promise, Tommy said solemnly. I'll never give up. George shook hands with all three of them, posed for a quick photo with Tommy's camera, and then climbed back onto his tour bus. As the massive vehicle pulled away, Tommy stood there holding his signed poster, feeling like his entire world had shifted on its axis. Dude, Jake said, breaking the silence, that was incredible. George Strait just told you that you have something special. I can't believe that really happened, Sarah added. He talked to you for like 10 minutes, and that message he wrote on your poster. Tommy read the message again, running his fingers over George's signature. Keep chasing those dreams. The world needs your music. The drive back to Millerville passed in a blur. Tommy sat in the back seat, carefully protecting his signed poster and reliving every moment of the conversation with George Strait. The words of encouragement echoed in his mind. It's not the instrument that makes the music. It's the musician. By the time they pulled into Tommy's driveway, it was nearly midnight. The house was dark, except for the porch light his parents had left on for him. He said goodbye to Jake and Sarah, promising to call them tomorrow to talk about everything that had happened. Inside, he found a note from his parents on the kitchen table. Welcome home, son. We hope you had the time of your life. There's leftover pizza in the fridge if you're hungry. We can't wait to hear all about it tomorrow. Love, Mom and Dad. Tommy went to his room, carefully placed the signed poster on his desk where he could see it from his bed, and picked up his duct-taped guitar. As he strummed the opening chords to Amarillo Morning, the same song George had opened with that evening, he could almost feel his hero's presence in the room with him. Keep chasing those dreams, he whispered to himself, and for the first time in his life, those dreams felt not just possible, but inevitable. Sunday morning dawned bright and clear, but Tommy had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw George Strait's encouraging smile and heard those life-changing words. "The world needs your music." He'd spent hours staring at the signed poster, reading and rereading the personal message until he had it memorized. When he finally wandered into the kitchen around 8:30, both of his parents were waiting for him with eager expressions and steaming cups of coffee. "Well?" his mother asked, her green eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Don't keep us in suspense. How was the concert?" Tommy poured himself a glass of orange juice and sat down at the small kitchen table. Where could he even begin? It was... He paused, searching for adequate words. "It was the most incredible experience of my entire life. Mom, Dad, I actually got to meet him. I got to talk to George Strait." His parents exchanged amazed glances. "You met George Strait?" his father asked, setting down his coffee cup with a clink. "Son, are you pulling our leg?" "No, Dad, I swear. Look." Tommy carefully retrieved the signed poster from his room and showed his parents the personal message. His mother's hand flew to her mouth as she read it. "Oh, Tommy," she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "He wrote that you have something special. George Strait himself believes in you." For the next hour, Tommy recounted every detail of the previous day, the drive to Austin, the excitement of the concert, helping with the equipment breakdown, and most importantly, the conversation with his hero. His parents listened with rapt attention, asking questions and marveling at their son's incredible luck. "You know what this means, don't you?" his father said when Tommy finished his story. "This isn't just about meeting a famous person. This is about someone who knows music better than almost anyone else recognizing something in you. That's not luck, son. That's validation." "But Dad, I still don't have a real guitar. I still can't afford lessons or—" "Tommy Mitchell," his mother interrupted firmly. "Didn't you hear what Mr. Strait told you? It's not the instrument that makes the music. You've been making beautiful music with that old guitar for months now. Maybe it's time to stop focusing on what you don't have and start appreciating what you do have." Later that afternoon, word of Tommy's encounter with George Strait had somehow spread through their small town. Sarah had called her sister, who told Jake, who mentioned it during his Sunday evening radio show. By Monday morning, it seemed like half of Millerville had heard the story. At school, Tommy found himself surrounded by classmates who had never paid much attention to him before. Some were genuinely excited for him, others seemed skeptical, and a few were clearly jealous. "So you're telling us that George Strait just happened to want to talk to some random kid from Millerville?" sneered Brad Wilson, a popular senior whose father owned the biggest car dealership in town. "Right. And I'm dating Taylor Swift." "It really happened, Brad," Sarah defended her friend. "I was there. I saw the whole thing." "Whatever," Brad replied with a dismissive wave. "Even if it did happen, it doesn't mean anything. Meeting a celebrity for 5 minutes doesn't make you a musician." Tommy felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment, but before he could respond, an unexpected voice joined the conversation. "Actually, Brad, it sounds like Tommy might be more of a musician than any of us realized." Everyone turned to see Emma Patterson, the president of the student council and one of the most respected students in school. Emma was known for her fairness and her ability to see the best in people, but she rarely involved herself in hallway drama. "What do you mean?" someone asked. "Well," Emma said thoughtfully, "George Strait has met thousands of people over his career. He's not going to waste 10 minutes of his time talking to someone unless he sees something worth talking about. If he told Tommy to keep chasing his dreams, maybe we should listen." The crowd began to disperse, but Emma lingered as Tommy gathered his books from his locker. "Tommy," she said quietly, "I hope you don't let people like Brad discourage you. What happened to you this weekend sounds truly special." "Thanks, Emma," Tommy replied, surprised by her support. I wish people could understand that this isn't about me trying to show off or anything. George Strait's music has gotten my family through some really tough times. Meeting him was like getting to thank someone who saved your life." Emma's expression softened. "Have you ever thought about sharing your music with people here at school? Maybe they'd understand better if they could hear what George Strait heard in you." Tommy shook his head immediately. "I couldn't do that. I'm not good enough to perform in front of people." "Tommy," Emma said gently, "a man who sold over 70 million albums just told you that you have something special. Maybe it's time to trust his judgment." That evening, Tommy sat on his front porch with his guitar, thinking about Emma's words. The idea of performing in front of his classmates terrified him, but George Strait's encouragement kept echoing in his mind. "Promise me you won't give up on your music, even when things get tough." He was so lost in thought that he didn't notice Mrs. Henderson, his elderly neighbor, approaching until she spoke. "That's beautiful music, Tommy," she said, settling into the old rocking chair she kept on her own porch. "I heard you got to meet George Strait this weekend. That must have been quite an experience for a young man who loves music as much as you do." "Yes, ma'am," Tommy replied, pausing his playing. "It was incredible. He was so kind, and he encouraged me to keep pursuing music." Mrs. Henderson smiled, her weathered face creasing with warmth. "You know, Tommy, I've been listening to you practice out here for months now. Your playing reminds me of my late husband, Earl. He used to sit on this very porch and play his guitar every evening after work." Tommy had never heard Mrs. Henderson mention her husband before. She'd been widowed for as long as he'd known her. "Earl worked at the railroad yard for 43 years, she continued, her voice taking on a distant quality. "But music was his passion. He never got to pursue it professionally. Times were different then, and we had bills to pay, but he never stopped playing. Some of my happiest memories are of sitting here listening to him play as the sun went down." She paused, wiping at her eyes with a handkerchief. "What I'm trying to say, Tommy, is that music has the power to heal, to comfort, to bring people together. When I hear you playing out here, it's like Earl is with me again, even just for a few minutes. Don't you ever underestimate the gift you have." Tommy felt a lump form in his throat. "Mrs. Henderson, I had no idea. I hope my playing doesn't bring up sad memories for you." "Oh, honey, no," she said quickly. "They're not sad memories at all. They're beautiful memories. Your music helps me remember the joy, not the loss." She stood up slowly, her arthritis making movement difficult. "You keep playing, Tommy Mitchell. The world needs more music and more young people who understand that music comes from the heart." As Mrs. Henderson made her way back to her house, Tommy sat in the gathering dusk, processing her words. Here was another person telling him that his music mattered, that it had the power to touch lives in ways he'd never imagined. That night, he called Sarah to tell her about his conversation with Mrs. Henderson. "Tommy, don't you see what's happening?" Sarah said excitedly. "First George Strait, then Emma Patterson, now Mrs. Henderson. All these people are telling you the same thing, that your music is special, that it matters. Maybe it's time you started believing them." "But Sarah, what if I'm not ready? What if I get up in front of people and embarrass myself? What if you don't? What if you get up there and show everyone what George Strait saw in you?" "Tommy, you'll never know unless you try." Tuesday morning brought an unexpected opportunity. During morning announcements, Principal Davis mentioned that the school's annual Fall Festival was coming up in 3 weeks, and they were still looking for student performers for the talent show. Students interested in participating should see Mrs. Rodriguez in the music room, the announcement concluded. Tommy's stomach did a flip. Mrs. Rodriguez was Jake's aunt and the school's music teacher. She was known for being encouraging but honest. If she thought someone had talent, she'd nurture it, but she wouldn't coddle students who weren't serious about music. Emma Patterson appeared at Tommy's locker during lunch. "Did you hear the announcement about the talent show?" she asked without preamble. "Yeah, I heard it. And what?" Emma gave him an exasperated look. "Tommy, this is perfect. It's a chance for you to share your music in a low-pressure environment. It's just other students and their families, not some huge audience. Emma, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I just don't think I'm ready." "When will you be ready? Next year, in 5 years?" "Tommy, George Strait didn't become successful by waiting until he felt ready. He became successful by taking chances and putting himself out there." That afternoon, Tommy found himself standing outside the music room door, his heart pounding. Through the small window, he could see Mrs. Rodriguez organizing sheet music at her desk. She was a small woman in her 50s, with graying hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He knocked tentatively. "Come in, Mrs. Rodriguez called. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I'm Tommy Mitchell. I was wondering about the talent show for the fall festival." "Ah, Tommy, Jake has mentioned you before. He says you're quite the guitarist." She gestured for him to sit down. "Are you thinking about performing?" Maybe. I'm not sure. I don't have any formal training or anything. I just taught myself by listening to music and watching videos online." Mrs. Rodriguez smiled. "Some of the best musicians I know are self-taught. There's something pure about learning music because you love it, not because you have to. What kind of music do you play?" "Mostly country. George Strait is my biggest influence." "Excellent choice." George Strait is a master of storytelling through song. His music connects with people because it's honest and authentic. She paused, studying Tommy's nervous expression. "Jake mentioned that you actually met Mr. Strait this past weekend?" Tommy nodded and briefly recounted the story, pulling out his phone to show her the photo Jake had taken of him with George Strait. Mrs. Rodriguez examined the photo carefully. "Tommy, this is remarkable. Not just that you met him, but look at your face in this picture. You're absolutely glowing with happiness. That's the look of someone who has found their passion." "He told me to keep chasing my dreams," Tommy said quietly. "He said the world needs my music." "Then perhaps you should listen to him," Mrs. Rodriguez said gently. "Would you be willing to play something for me right now, just so I can get a sense of your abilities?" Tommy hesitated. "I don't have my guitar with me." "I have several here." She gestured toward a rack of acoustic guitars in the corner of the room. "Choose whichever one feels comfortable." With trembling hands, Tommy selected a beautiful Martin acoustic guitar, probably worth more than his family's car. As he adjusted the strap and checked the tuning, he was amazed by how perfectly the instrument was set up, how easily his fingers found the frets. "What would you like to play?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked, settling into a chair across from him. Tommy took a deep breath and started the opening chords to Check, Yes or No, one of George Strait's most beloved songs. As he began to sing, his nervousness melted away. The words flowed naturally, and his fingers found every chord change with ease. When he finished, Mrs. Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. "Tommy," she said finally, "that was beautiful. Your voice has a natural warmth and sincerity that can't be taught, and your guitar playing, while it may be self-taught, shows real musical instinct. Really, I'd like to make you an offer. If you're willing to perform in the talent show, I'll work with you over the next 3 weeks to help you prepare. We can work on stage presence, maybe add some musical arrangements to make your performance even stronger." Tommy felt a mixture of excitement and terror. What if I mess up in front of everyone? What if you don't? Tommy, every musician has to face their first audience sometime. George Strait had a first audience. Johnny Cash had a first audience. Even I had a first audience back when I was young and terrified. She smiled warmly. The only way to overcome the fear of performing is to perform. Could I think about it for a day or two? Of course. But Tommy, don't think too long. Sometimes when we overthink things, we talk ourselves out of opportunities that could change our lives. That evening, Tommy sat on his front porch with his old guitar, running through songs in his head and trying to imagine himself on stage in front of his classmates and their families. The thought still terrified him, but underneath the fear was something else, excitement. His parents joined him on the porch as the sun began to set. "You're deep in thought tonight," his mother observed, settling into the old lawn chair beside him. "Mrs. Rodriguez wants me to perform in the talent show at the fall festival," Tommy said without looking up from his guitar. "That's wonderful," his father exclaimed. "What did you tell her?" "That I'd think about it. Dad, what if I'm not good enough? What if people laugh at me?" Robert Mitchell was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Son, do you remember when you were about 8 years old and you wanted to try out for Little League?" Tommy nodded. "You were terrified that you wouldn't be good enough, that the other kids would be better than you. But your mother and I convinced you to try anyway. Do you remember what happened?" "I struck out my first 3 times at bat," Tommy said with a rueful smile. "That's right, but you kept trying. And by the end of the season, you were one of the best players on the team. Not because you were naturally gifted, but because you had the courage to start and the determination to keep going." "Your father's right," Linda added. "Tommy, we've watched you grow as a musician over these past few months. We've heard you playing out here, getting better every single day. And if George Strait saw something special in you, maybe it's time you trusted that judgment. But what if—" "Tommy," his mother interrupted gently, "what if you spend your whole life wondering, what if, instead of finding out what could be?" Wednesday morning, Tommy found Mrs. Rodriguez in the music room before first period. "I'd like to do the talent show," he said without preamble, "if the offer is still open." Mrs. Rodriguez beamed. "The offer is definitely still open. I'm so proud of you for making this decision, Tommy. When would you like to start rehearsing?" "As soon as possible. I want to be as prepared as I can be." "Excellent. How about we meet after school today? We can work on song selection and start talking about what kind of performance you want to give." Over the next week, Tommy threw himself into preparation with an intensity that surprised everyone, including himself. He met with Mrs. Rodriguez every day after school, working on his stage presence, his voice projection, and the technical aspects of his guitar playing that could be improved. Mrs. Rodriguez suggested he perform 2 songs, one up-tempo number to get the audience engaged, and one slower, more emotional piece to showcase his storytelling ability. "Your strength isn't just in your technical skill," she explained during one of their sessions. "It's in your ability to make people feel something when you sing. That's a rare gift, Tommy." For his up-tempo song, they chose "All My Exes Live in Texas," which would be fun and familiar to the audience. For his slower number, Tommy surprised Mrs. Rodriguez by suggesting "I Cross My Heart," one of George Strait's most romantic and emotionally powerful songs. "That's a challenging choice," Mrs. Rodriguez said. "It's a song about deep, lasting love. Do you think you can connect with that emotion at your age?" Tommy thought about his parents, working multiple jobs and struggling to make ends meet, but never losing their love for each other or their family. He thought about the way his father looked at his mother when she came home exhausted from a double shift, the way they still held hands while watching TV in the evenings. "Yes, Mom," he said confidently, "I can connect with that." As word spread that Tommy Mitchell was going to perform at the talent show, reactions around school were mixed. Some students were excited and supportive, others were skeptical, and a few seemed determined to see him fail. "I heard Tommy Mitchell thinks he's the next George Strait," Brad Wilson said loudly in the hallway, clearly intending for Tommy to overhear. "This should be entertaining." But for every negative comment, There seemed to be two positive ones. Emma Patterson had become something of an unofficial publicist, encouraging people to come to the show and support their classmate. Even some of the teachers had heard about Tommy's encounter with George Strait and were curious to hear what he could do. The most unexpected support came from a surprising source. On Friday afternoon, as Tommy was leaving his final rehearsal with Mrs. Rodriguez, he found Jake Rodriguez waiting in the hallway. "Hey, Tommy, my aunt tells me you're really preparing something special for the talent show." "I'm trying," Tommy replied. "I just hope I don't embarrass myself." "Listen, I have an idea that might help. What if I recorded your performance for the radio station? We could air it during our local spotlight segment, maybe get some real feedback from the community." Tommy's eyes widened. "You think it would be good enough for the radio?" "I think if George Strait saw potential in you, then it's worth giving you a platform to show that potential to more people." That weekend, Tommy practiced more intensively than ever before. He played until his fingertips were sore, ran through his songs until he could perform them flawlessly, even when distracted. His parents listened patiently as he played the same two songs over and over, offering encouragement and gentle suggestions. On Sunday evening, as Tommy sat on the front porch running through his set list one more time, Mrs. Henderson appeared at her own door. "Tommy, honey, could you play 'I Cross My Heart' one more time? It was Earl's and my wedding song." As Tommy played the beautiful ballad, he noticed that Mrs. Henderson wasn't the only one listening. Several neighbors had come out onto their porches, drawn by the music. When he finished, there was spontaneous applause from up and down the street. "Beautiful, son," called Mr. Patterson from 3 houses down. "You're going to do great at that talent show." For the first time, Tommy began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he was ready for this. The morning of the fall festival dawned crisp and clear, with the kind of perfect autumn weather that made small-town festivals magical. Tommy had barely slept, his mind racing through every chord change, every lyric, every possible thing that could go wrong during his performance. He'd been awake since 5:30, sitting on his bed with his guitar, running through his songs in whispers so as not to wake his parents. The fall festival wouldn't start until noon, and the talent show wasn't scheduled until 4 o'clock, but Tommy felt like he needed every possible minute to prepare. At breakfast, his mother set down a plate of pancakes in front of him, but Tommy's stomach was too knotted with nerves to eat much. "Honey, you need to eat something," Linda urged. "You'll need your strength for today." "I'm too nervous, Mom. What if I forget the words? What if my guitar goes out of tune? What if—" "Tommy," his father interrupted gently, "do you remember what George Strait told you about music coming from the heart?" Tommy nodded. "Then trust your heart today. You know these songs better than you know your own name. You've been playing them for months. The only thing that's different today is that people will be listening. That's the part that scares me." Linda reached across the table and squeezed her son's hand. "Tommy, we are so proud of you for having the courage to do this. No matter what happens today, you're already a winner in our eyes." The Mitchell family arrived at the fall festival around noon. The school's parking lot and surrounding fields had been transformed into a bustling carnival atmosphere. There were game booths, food trucks, a small Ferris wheel, and a main stage where local bands had been performing all morning. The talent show stage was smaller, set up near the gymnasium, with rows of folding chairs arranged in front of it. A banner reading "Millerville High School Fall Festival Talent Show" hung across the back of the stage, and Tommy felt his stomach do another flip as he looked at it. "Tommy!" Sarah called out, weaving through the crowd with Jake close behind her. "There you are, we've been looking everywhere for you. How are you feeling?" Jake asked, carrying what looked like professional recording equipment. "Terrified," Tommy admitted, "but also excited, I think. It's hard to tell the difference right now." "That's perfectly normal," Jake assured him. "Every performer gets nervous before they go on stage. The trick is learning to channel that nervous energy into your performance." They spent the next few hours wandering around the festival, trying to distract Tommy from his upcoming performance. They played carnival games, shared funnel cake, and watched the other festivities, but Tommy's eyes kept drifting back to the talent show stage. Around 3 o'clock, Mrs. Rodriguez found them near the ring toss booth. "Tommy, it's time for the performers' meeting," she said. "We need to go over the running order and do sound checks." Tommy's mouth went dry. "Sound checks?" "Don't worry," Mrs. Rodriguez smiled. "It's just to make sure the microphones are working and to get you comfortable with the stage setup. You'll do fine." The performers' meeting was held in a classroom behind the gymnasium. Tommy was surprised to see 15 other students gathered there. Singers, dancers, a comedian, and even a girl who was planning to demonstrate martial arts. He'd been so focused on his own nervousness that he hadn't really thought about the other acts. "All right, everyone." Mrs. Rodriguez called the group to attention. "Let's go over the running order one more time. We'll start with the dance numbers, then move to the musical acts, and finish with our specialty performances." Tommy was scheduled to perform 11th out of 16 acts, right in the heart of the show. Mrs. Rodriguez had explained that this was actually a good position after the audience was warmed up, but before they started getting restless. "Tommy Mitchell," Mrs. Rodriguez called. "You're up for sound check." Walking onto the stage, even with just a handful of other performers watching, made Tommy's heart race. The microphone stand seemed impossibly tall, and the guitar input cable looked like it might not reach from where he wanted to stand. "Just play a little bit of one of your songs," called the sound technician from behind the mixing board. "I need to set your levels." Tommy started the opening chords to "All My Exes Live in Texas" and immediately felt some of his nervousness fade. The sound system was excellent, much better than anything he'd ever played through before, and his guitar tone sounded rich and full through the speakers. "That sounds great, Tommy," Mrs. Rodriguez called from the audience area. "How does it feel up there?" "Better than I expected," Tommy admitted, and he meant it. There was something about being on stage, even for a sound check, that felt natural to him. After all the performers had completed their sound checks, Mrs. Rodriguez gathered them together one more time. "I want each of you to remember why you decided to perform today," she said. "It wasn't for fame or fortune. It was because you have something to share, something that brings you joy, and you wanted to share that joy with others. Trust in that, and everything else will fall into place." By 4 o'clock, the area in front of the talent show stage was packed. Tommy peeked out from behind the stage and was amazed to see at least 200 people in the audience, far more than he'd expected. He spotted his parents in the 3rd row, his mother holding her old camera and his father giving him an encouraging thumbs up. The show began with a group of sophomore girls performing a hip-hop dance routine to thunderous applause. They were followed by a senior boy who sang a beautiful rendition of Hallelujah that left the audience in awed silence. As each act performed, Tommy felt his nervousness building again. These weren't just casual performers. These were students who had clearly been training for years. The dancers moved with professional precision, the singers had obviously had voice lessons, and even the comedian had polished material that had the audience laughing consistently. "What am I doing here?" Tommy whispered to himself as a junior girl finished a flawless piano performance of a classical piece. "You're here because you belong here," said a voice behind him. Tommy turned to see Emma Patterson dressed in a flowing dress and carrying what looked like a violin case. "Emma, I didn't know you were performing." "Violin solo," she said with a nervous smile. "I'm 2 acts after you and I'm absolutely terrified." "You? But you're Emma Patterson. You're confident about everything." Emma laughed. "Tommy, being confident in student council meetings and being confident about performing music are 2 completely different things. Right now, my hands are shaking so much I can barely hold my bow." It was oddly comforting to know that even someone as composed as Emma was dealing with the same fears he was. "What are you playing?" Tommy asked. a piece called Meditation by Massenet. It's beautiful but technically challenging, and if I mess up, there's nowhere to hide with a solo violin piece. "You'll do great," Tommy said, and realized he meant it. "I've heard you play during school assemblies. You're really talented." "Thanks." "And Tommy, I've heard you practicing with Mrs. Rodriguez. You're going to blow everyone away out there." The acts continued, each one seeming more polished and professional than the last. A group of band students performed a jazz number that would have been impressive in a professional club. Twin sisters sang a harmony-heavy pop song that showcased their years of voice training. Finally, Mrs. Rodriguez appeared beside him. "Tommy, you're up next. Are you ready?" Tommy's mouth was so dry he could barely speak. "I think so. Remember what we practiced. Connect with the audience. Tell your story through the music and trust your instincts. You've got this." The student before him finished a magic act to enthusiastic applause, and suddenly Mrs. Rodriguez was walking onto the stage with a microphone. "Our next performer is Junior Tommy Mitchell," she announced to the audience. Tommy is a self-taught guitarist and singer who recently had the opportunity to meet his musical hero, George Strait, who encouraged him to pursue his passion for music. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tommy Mitchell. The applause was warm and encouraging as Tommy walked onto the stage, his guitar strap over his shoulder and his heart pounding so hard he was sure the audience could hear it. The stage lights were brighter than he'd expected, making it difficult to see individual faces in the crowd, which was actually a relief. He approached the microphone, adjusted the height slightly and plugged in his guitar. The small actions gave him a moment to collect himself and remember Mrs. Rodriguez's advice about connecting with the audience. "Good afternoon, everyone," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "I'm Tommy Mitchell, and I'm a little nervous up here, so please bear with me." There was a ripple of sympathetic laughter from the audience, and Tommy felt some of his tension ease. "A couple of weeks ago, I had the incredible opportunity to meet George Strait at a benefit concert in Austin. He told me something that I'll never forget. He said that music comes from the heart, not from the wallet. So today, I want to share some music that comes straight from my heart." He started the opening chords to "All My Exes Live in Texas" and immediately felt the transformation he'd experienced during his sound check. The nervousness didn't disappear completely, but it channeled into energy that seemed to flow through his fingers and into his voice. The audience responded immediately to the familiar song, with some people clapping along and others singing the chorus. Tommy found himself smiling as he played, feeding off the crowd's energy and starting to genuinely enjoy himself. When the song ended, the applause was enthusiastic and sustained. Tommy felt a rush of confidence unlike anything he'd ever experienced. "Thank you," he said into the microphone. "This next song is one of my favorites by George Strait. It's called I Cross My Heart, and it's about the kind of love that lasts a lifetime, the kind of love I see between my parents every single day." As he started the gentle, romantic ballad, Tommy closed his eyes and thought about his parents' relationship. 20 years of marriage, countless struggles with money and work, and all the challenges that life throws at a family. But through it all, their love for each other had never wavered. The audience fell completely silent as Tommy's voice filled the air. The song was more challenging than All My Exes Live in Texas, requiring more vocal range and emotional depth. But Tommy felt like he was channeling every lesson he'd learned from listening to George Strait's music. When he reached the chorus, "I cross my heart and promise to give all I've got to give, to make all your dreams come true," his voice soared with genuine emotion. He wasn't just singing words, he was telling a story about commitment, about sacrifice, about the kind of love that his parents had shown him every day of his life. As the final notes faded away, the audience was silent for a moment before erupting into the loudest applause of the afternoon. Tommy opened his eyes to see people on their feet, including his parents, who were both wiping away tears. "Thank you so much," Tommy said into the microphone, his own voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for listening." As he walked off the stage, Tommy felt like he was floating. The fear was gone, replaced by an incredible sense of accomplishment and joy. He had done it. He had performed in front of 200 people, and not only had he not embarrassed himself, but he had actually moved them. Mrs. Rodriguez was waiting in the wings with a huge smile on her face. "Tommy, that was absolutely beautiful," she said, giving him a hug. "I've been teaching music for 25 years, and I've rarely seen a student connect with an audience the way you just did." Sarah and Jake appeared moments later, both talking excitedly. "Tommy, that was incredible," Sarah exclaimed. "I got chills during I Cross My Heart. You sounded like a professional." "I recorded the whole thing," Jake added, patting his recording equipment. "This is definitely going on the radio. The community needs to hear this." As the remaining acts performed, Tommy watched from backstage, still processing what had just happened. Emma Patterson's violin solo was indeed beautiful and technically impressive, earning her a well-deserved standing ovation. The final acts included a comedy routine that had the audience laughing uproariously and a step-dancing performance that brought down the house. When all the performances were complete, Mrs. Rodriguez returned to the stage to announce the winners. There were 3 categories: technical excellence, crowd favorite, and overall performance. For technical excellence, Mrs. Rodriguez announced, "The winner is Emma Patterson for her violin performance of Meditation." Emma beamed as she accepted her small trophy, and Tommy applauded enthusiastically. She had deserved the recognition. Her performance had been flawless. For crowd favorite, determined by audience applause, Mrs. Rodriguez paused for dramatic effect. "The winner is Tommy Mitchell." Tommy couldn't believe what he was hearing. The audience burst into applause again, and he found himself walking back onto the stage in a daze to accept his trophy. And finally, for overall performance, recognizing the combination of technical skill, stage presence, and emotional connection with the audience, the winner is also Tommy Mitchell. The crowd erupted, and Tommy stood on the stage holding 2 trophies, feeling like he was living in a dream. His parents were on their feet cheering, Sarah was jumping up and down, and even some of his classmates who had been skeptical were applauding enthusiastically. As the awards ceremony concluded and the audience began to disperse, Tommy was surrounded by people wanting to congratulate him. Classmates who had never spoken to him before were telling him how much they'd enjoyed his performance. Parents were asking if he gave music lessons. Teachers were encouraging him to pursue music more seriously. "Tommy!" called a familiar voice through the crowd. Tommy turned to see Mrs. Henderson making her way toward him, moving carefully but with obvious excitement. "Mrs. Henderson, you came to the show." "I wouldn't have missed it for the world, honey. When Earl was alive, we never missed a single school talent show. It's one of the things I love most about living in a small town, watching young people discover their gifts." She reached into her purse and pulled out an old photograph, slightly yellowed with age. "I wanted to show you this," she said, handing him the picture. "This is Earl at his first and only public performance at our church's Harvest Festival in 1962. Look at his face." Tommy studied the photograph. A young man who looked remarkably like Mrs. Henderson's late husband was standing on a small stage with a guitar, and his expression was one of pure joy and accomplishment, probably very similar to how Tommy had looked just minutes ago. "He talked about that performance for the rest of his life," Mrs. Henderson continued. "Said it was one of the best nights he ever had, even though he never performed publicly again. Music gave him so much joy, Tommy. And today, you've shown that it gives you that same joy. Don't ever let anyone convince you to give that up." As the crowd thinned out, Tommy's parents finally made their way to him. "Son," his father said, his voice thick with emotion, "I have never been more proud of you than I am right now. Not because you won those trophies, but because you had the courage to get up there and share your gift with all of us. You were magnificent, Tommy, his mother added, tears streaming down her cheeks. When you sang I Cross My Heart, I looked around and saw people in the audience crying. You didn't just perform those songs, you made people feel something. That's what real musicians do. As they packed up Tommy's guitar and trophies, Jake approached with his recording equipment. Tommy, I meant what I said about putting this on the radio. Would you be okay with that? You really think people would want to hear it? I think people need to hear it. In a world full of manufactured music and auto-tuned vocals, hearing someone sing with genuine heart and soul is rare. What you did today was special, and it deserves a bigger audience. That evening, as the Mitchell family sat around their kitchen table sharing a celebratory dinner of pizza, a rare treat in their household, Tommy reflected on the incredible day. Just a few hours ago, he had been terrified of performing in front of people. Now, he was holding 2 trophies and had been told that his performance would be broadcast on the radio. You know what the best part of today was? Tommy said as he took a bite of pizza. What's that, son? His father asked. For the first time in my life, I felt like I might actually have something valuable to offer the world. Not because of any trophies or recognition, but because I saw how music could make people feel something, could bring them together, could create these moments of connection. That's exactly what George Strait was talking about, his mother said. Music from the heart has the power to touch other hearts. Later that night, Tommy sat on his front porch with his guitar, playing softly in the cool autumn air. The day had been perfect. But more than that, it had shown him something about himself that he'd never fully understood before. He wasn't just someone who played guitar as a hobby. He was a musician, someone who could use music to communicate, to connect, to inspire. George Strait had seen it, Mrs. Rodriguez had nurtured it, and today an entire audience had confirmed it. As he strummed the opening chords to Amarillo Morning, Tommy thought about everything that had led to this moment. The struggles his family faced, the encouragement from unexpected sources, the terrifying decision to perform in public, and the incredible validation of connecting with an audience through music. Tomorrow, Jake would air his performance on the radio, and who knew what opportunities that might lead to. But regardless of what happened next, Tommy knew that today had changed him fundamentally. He was no longer a kid who dreamed about being a musician someday. He was a musician who was just getting started. 2 weeks after the Fall Festival, Tommy's life had settled into a new rhythm. Jake had aired his performance on KCTX's local Spotlight segment, and the response from the community had been overwhelming. The radio station's phone had rung constantly with people asking for information about that young man who sang George Strait songs, and Jake had fielded requests for Tommy to perform at everything from church services to birthday parties. Tommy had agreed to a few small performances, a song at Mrs. Patterson's 80th birthday party, a brief set at the local nursing home, and a performance at his church's Sunday evening service. Each time he felt more comfortable on stage, more confident in his ability to connect with an audience. But the most significant change wasn't in his public recognition. It was in how he saw himself. He'd started writing his own songs, simple pieces about small-town life and family struggles that felt authentic to his experience. Mrs. Rodriguez had encouraged him to develop his songwriting, suggesting that original material might be the key to taking his music to the next level. On a crisp Tuesday morning in early November, Tommy was in the music room working on a new song with Mrs. Rodriguez when Principal Davis appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Rodriguez, Tommy, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here to see you, Tommy. He's waiting in my office. Tommy looked puzzled. Someone to see me? He says his name is Marcus Webb, and he's from Austin. Something about the radio broadcast of your performance. Tommy's heart started racing. Marcus Webb was a name he recognized, a talent manager who worked with several up-and-coming country artists in Texas. He'd seen Webb's name mentioned in articles about the Austin music scene. "Should I come with you?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked, clearly as surprised as Tommy. "Yes, please," Tommy said quickly. "I have no idea what this is about." They walked to the principal's office, where a well-dressed man in his 40s was waiting. Marcus Webb was tall and lean, with graying hair and the kind of confident demeanor that suggested he was used to being the most important person in the room. "Tommy Mitchell." Webb stood and extended his hand. "I'm Marcus Webb. I represent several artists in the Texas country music scene." "Yes, sir," Tommy replied, shaking his hand. "This is Mrs. Rodriguez, my music teacher. Pleasure to meet you both. Tommy, I heard your performance on KCTX radio last week. A friend of mine in the music business lives in this area and happened to be listening. He called me immediately and said I needed to hear this kid sing."